Good evening, everyone. This is Jamie Cullum from London, here with Jazz Riot on InterFM. I've been writing a lot of new music at the moment, so I'm actually coming to you this week from my home studio. I live just outside of London, and I record and write a lot of my music right here in this very room. And so I'm surrounded by my records, I'm surrounded by my instruments, and that's where I am this week. I hope you enjoy it.
InterFM, Jamie Cullum's Jazz Riot.
Good evening, everybody. This is Jamie Cullum on BBC Radio 2. Welcome to another hour of jazz. You are joining me this week in my home studio, where I'm surrounded by some awesome records to play, taking you right through the journey from the beginning to where we are right now in jazz. And so many good things, so many good grooves to play for you tonight, including on tonight's show special guests Medeski, Martin and Wood. They're a musical trio who really have inspired me almost more than any other band working currently in the world of jazz today. They bring together so many brilliant sounds. They're a great bunch and just keep creating amazing music. So inspiring to me. Very excited to have them on the show. Plus one more last live track from the Nostalgia 77 session that I played for you last week from the Maida Vale studios. Also music from Wayne Shorter, Melanie de Biasio, and some really deep cuts from Sarah Webster Fabio and also Roy Porter Sound Machine. But let's get going first with the man who kind of invented the drum solo. I promise you you are going to be able to forgive him for that, because he was one of the greats. This is Gene Krupa playing Jerry Mulligan's disc jockey Jump. That's Gene Krupa, originally from an album called Gene Krupa Plays Jerry Mulligan Arrangements, came out on Verve Records in 1958. A very uninspiring title for an album, really, that, isn't it? But I'll explain a little bit about it. Gene Krupa was one of the early big band leaders and drummers, a very important drummer. He wasn't technically the most gifted of drummers, but he was the guy who kind of invented the idea of the superstar drummer kind of backing a band. He was in Benny Goodman's band for some time until he got so big that the egos were too much, and he struck out on his own and was a massively successful big band leader in his own right. And he recorded a lot of the arrangements that Jerry Mulligan wrote for him when he was in his band. By this time, with this recording, Disc Jockey Jump was a huge hit for Gene Krupa. Jerry Mulligan wasn't in the band, but he was playing a bunch of his arrangements and playing them beautifully. I hope you enjoyed that opening up the show tonight. That's Gene Krupa and Disc Jockey Jump. Got to say hi to a couple of people. Firstly, Ian Cockayne. He says, great jazz show, good variety as well. I purchased Zara McFarlane's If You Knew Her last week. What a treat that album is. I'm glad you are listening to this show and going out and purchasing some stuff after you've heard some of the great music we play. Also, Mandy and Ian Kamesh, they both wrote in to say how much they enjoyed the Eddie Sine track I played a couple of weeks back called Cameo. Digging out a lot of interesting kind of lost stuff that many people haven't heard. First time hearing it on the show. I'm glad you're all enjoying it.
Jamie Cullum's Jazz Riot. Jamie Cullum's Jazz Riot. Jamie Cullum's Jazz Riot on InterFM.
Now, Orchestra Imperial is an 18-piece big band from Brazil. They really are playing in that traditional samba sound. They were formed in 2002, but they really play the music of Brazil's past and try and kick it into the future, and they're doing a brilliant job of it too. So here they are from their latest album. This is Tamancas do Catarete.
Tentando se esquecer, parado aí sem ter o que fazer, tá esperando o tártaro crescer, já demorou, virou tataravô. Enquanto o tempo passa por você, você passa pensando sem saber, enquanto o samba manda porque só lhe restou caterete. Já descobriu que tem saudade, já procurou a solução, pra você não tem saída, vai roendo a solidão. Quando chega a despedida, é mais um dente pra adição. E quando o sol no céu levanta, o galo canta clarear, um cheirinho a brisa mansa, o cavaquinho a perfumar, e você pisa na tamanca, e a tamanca vai cantar. Parado aí sem ter o que fazer, tá esperando o tártaro crescer, já demorou, virou tataravô. Enquanto o tempo passa por você, você passa pensando sem saber, com tanto samba mambo, porque só lhe restou caterete. Já descobriu que tem saudade, já procurou a solução, pra você não tem saída, vai roendo a solidão. E quando chega a despedida, é mais um dente pra adição. E quando o sol no céu levanta, o galo canta clarear, um cheirinho a brisa mansa, o cavaquinho a perfumar, e você pisa na tamanca, e a tamanca vai cantar.
That's Orchestra Imperial from their second album. It came out at the start of this month. The track was called Tamancas do Catarete. Now, what always happens whenever I say anything in Portuguese is that there are many of you that are listening in from Brazil and indeed from Portugal is that you tell me my pronunciation is terrible. So please let me know how I should be saying that. But listen, the album is brilliant. Orquestra Imperial from their second album, Fazendo as Pazes com o Swing. And that translates as make peace with the swing. And that's something I can say. I'm going to go back now to a brilliant re-release that Tramp Records re-released in 2012 from a band called Roy Porter's Sound Machine. The Roy Porter Sound Machine existed between 1971 and 1975, led by the incredible drummer Roy Porter, who played on some of the big original early hits for Charlie Parker. So he's kind of, there at the beginning of bebop. He played on Ornithology, for example, the recording that everyone knows. But actually, the Roy Porter Sound Machine did something different. They were working more in the world where jazz meets funk, and it's the kind of music he was making in the early 70s is really the kind of music that, without which a lot of modern music wouldn't exist, I think. A lot of beat music, a lot of hip-hop music, a lot of dance music. This is those kind of deep cuts, a lot of which were lost but rediscovered by record collectors and hip-hop producers and people like that. And when you hear this music, you can hear how deep the sounds are, how deep the connection between jazz and funk and dance music is. And done, the Roy Porter Sound Machine, they just made music that sounded so off-kilter, not like anyone else's. And I just absolutely love this track. It's one of my favourites. This is the Roy Porter Sound Machine. This is Funky Twitch. That's the Roy Porter Sound Machine. The track was called Funky Twitch from an incredible re-release. It's called The Story of the Roy Porter Sound Machine. Collects loads of the great music they made between 1971 and 1975. Came out on Tramp Records in 2012, and it's essential. Keep listening, because after this I've got music from the amazing Melanie Di Biasio, plus we'll hear from this week's guests, my heroes Medeski, Martin and Wood.
InterFM, Jamie Cullum's Jazz Riot.
This is Jamie Cullum. I hope you're enjoying my show, Jazz Riot, on InterFM. Now, I played you a track from this singer a couple of weeks back, and I got great response. You were similarly blown away by the voice of Melanie Di Biasio. She's from Belgium, and she's got one of those voices. It's not a showboating voice at all. It's just one of those voices that absolutely makes you stand still as soon as you hear it. I really, really love her, and I'm very happy to say she's going to be playing at this year's Cheltenham Jazz Festival as well. I invited her to come and play. Also, I'm hopefully going to be chatting to her then, because I'm going to be filling in for the Dermot O'Leary Saturday afternoon show, which means I get 3 hours from the Cheltenham Jazz Festival to take over the Radio 2 airwaves. Very much looking forward to that whole show and chatting to Melanie as well. For now, here's Melanie's track from her latest album, No Deal. It's coming out on April the 21st. This is I'm Gonna Leave You.
I'm gonna leave you. Yes, I'm gonna leave you. 'Cause I want it, and I go with it. People love me, and I stay there because they love me. No more headaches, no more heartbreaks. No more, no more. I'm gonna leave you with your money. I want somebody to call me honey. I don't wanna go dreams, I wanna hear sweet things. I need affection and not protection. When you're teasing, you should be squeezing. I'm gonna leave you. Yes, I'm gonna leave you. Yes, I'm gonna. I don't need you, baby, no more. I don't need you no more. No more, no more, no more. Yes, I'm pulled up with your person, and I'm pulled up with your person. I'm gonna leave you. Yes, I'm gonna leave you. 'Cause I wanna. Yes, I'm gonna.
Amazing. That's the sound of Melanie Di Biasio from her latest album, No Deal. Comes out on April the 21st in the UK. The track was called I'm Gonna Leave You. Listen out for her at the Cheltenham Jazz Festival. Also my interview with her, hopefully, when I'm filling in for Dermot O'Leary the weekend at the Cheltenham Jazz Festival on Saturday afternoon. That's the May bank holiday weekend. Okay, it's time now to hear from Medeski, Martin and Wood. They are a trio of musicians that have influenced me so much. They are a modern trio, very much in the true sense of the word modern, although very much what they do is rooted in jazz. Really, they have as much in common with hip-hop and funk music as well. They're as much influenced by the likes of Jimmy Smith as they are with free jazz musicians like Ornette Coleman. I think, maybe 10 years ago when I started thinking about what I wanted to do as a musician, I said that I wanted to exist in the space where someone like Ben Folds is and where Medeski, Martin and Wood is. And I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but often or not, I set myself that task. And hearing them speak now, maybe some of it will be put into perspective for you. Also, listen out for them talking about how interesting it was when hip-hop music started to influence jazz over the way rock music was influencing jazz. I think it's a really, really interesting way of looking how rhythms work within jazz music and how people interpret them. Let's go over now to Medeski, Martin and Wood.
This is Medeski,
Martin, and Wood.
And you're listening to Jamie Cullum on BBC Radio 2. For me, it was a very specific moment when I got into jazz. I remember it clearly. I started taking piano lessons when I was 5, classical music. But I would also play a lot of these written out arrangements of these old songs that my parents liked to hear. So I would pull out these arrangements by Carmen Cavallero, Peter Nero, Ferranti and Teicher, Roger Williams, that sort of thing. And I was probably, maybe 10 or 11 years old, and my neighbor, my best friend's older brother, was a drummer. And I remember we went into his room, and he had a real fancy stereo, and he played a bunch of records. And I remember this one record in particular was Oscar Peterson, live at Montreux with Ray Brown and Niles Pedersen, 2 bass players. And Sweet Georgia Brown was the tune, so I had heard the song and I knew it, but I had never heard it played like that before. And I remember my head just got shredded off my body, and I realized there was a whole other way for this music to sound. And that was it. And then I just dove in and started checking everything out that I could.
Not all about jazz for me, it started out a lot with rock and roll and blues and Brazilian music. I was deeply in the Brazilian scene. That's what really connected me to the jazz world, which was sort of the progressive jazz world in the 80s. And that's what connected me to musicians like Bob Moses, who's a drummer, composer, and someone who's responsible for introducing the 3 of us. And, then I got to play with, people like Pat Metheny and Bill Frisell and Jaco Pastorius, introduced to all these, John Schofield, were all friends of Bob Moses. So that for me was the beginning of feeling like I could find my own place in that world. And because I lived in New York, it helped me define who I was and feel comfortable with my idiosyncrasies.
This is Medeski, Martin and Wood, and you're listening to Jamie Cullum on BBC Radio 2.
started with Furious 5, Grandmaster Flash, and then The Far Side. Yeah, the bizarre ride to The Far Side was we listened to that a million times.
Now in my younger days I used to score a shag. When I went to school I carried lunch in a bag with the apple for my teacher, cause I knew I'd get a kiss. Always got mad when the class was dismissed.
When hip-hop came, it was almost like this door opened for jazz artists, because in a lot of ways, you know, what happened with rock jazz or jazz rock turned into this fusion thing, and it became a very watered down, insipid elevator type of music. And what the hip-hop beat did was it provided this drum beat that had a little more play to it, a little more swing, which is just, technically speaking, it's more conducive to the kind of melodies that are in jazz, these lines. And it gives it a much better feeling. And so in a lot of ways, if that wasn't an element of the way Billy played and just in pop music in general, we may have never done what we did, because so much had been done with this sort of straighter rock groove that it was played out and it had already died and had flowers growing out of it, and it was over. So it was like it was really was this, you know, when it was suddenly it was like, okay, now we can play some kind of groove based music that has some guts to it now.
Give her a hug. She was married to the man, he was a thug, his name was Lee. He drove a Z, he picked her up from school probably at 3 o'clock. I was on her jock, yes and Jeannie. I wrote graffiti on the bus. First I read her name, then Barbara Plus with my name last. Something looking last. I seen her yesterday, but still I had to let her pass.
The production of it influenced me. There weren't really musicians playing on it, but it was more like how they would drop the beats out, how they would juxtapose two different things that you wouldn't normally put together if you were playing. And those kind of things in hip-hop was exciting to me, because that's really what the experimental scene was about, was taking two very foreign things and bringing them together and blending them together in a way that was avant-garde.
One of the things that we love to do is we like to take different styles of music and put them together. So F Freak is it's not an original of ours. It's a Lee Morgan composition that the Art Blakey Quintet played with Wayne Shorter, Bobby Timmons, Jimmy Merritt, and Art Blakey. And it's just an incredible tune, because this sort of takes this sort of African 6/8 and combines it with swing.
A new record coming out that we're excited about, because we're collaborating with someone we haven't yet, and that is Nels Cline, amazing guitarist who is known for playing with Wilco, along with a lot of other downtown artists and experimental artists. He's great. So last year we recorded in a studio in front of a small live audience, and the concept was to just improvise 2 sets live in front of the audience, not talk about what we're going to play, just play. And that came out of a stint we did with Nels one night at the Blue Note in New York. We did a series of gigs, and we had this really great chemistry with him, so we wanted to try this in the studio with him, and it worked out really well. And we're looking forward to touring in Europe soon.
I remember hearing them for the first time on the Radio 3 program, Late Junction. I was at university, and I'm not going to lie, I had Radio 3 on by accident, but I heard a little bit of their music, and I went straight out and I bought the album Shackman. And God, that was a long time ago now. I hope to have them in for a longer interview and a big session on this show very, very soon. That is a plan. Want to get them in session in the Maida Vale studios and sit down and talk to them at great length. And hopefully that'll be coming up soon. Also, Medeski, Martin and Wood, they're going to be playing with the guitarist that they talked about, Nels Klein, at Under the Bridge in London on the 6th of April. You will see me there with my Medeski, Martin and Wood t-shirt on. Definitely. Now, Sarah Webster Fabio, she was an American poet who mixed spoken word and funk in her music. This is one of those brilliantly deep albums that are quite hard to find, but well worth seeking out if you can. She was a beautiful poet who wrote many great poetry books and poetry collections, but she also made some fine musical albums as well. This is from a 1976 album called Alchemy of the Blues. This is such a classic track where spoken word, funk and jazz meet each other. This is Sarah Webster Fabio with all her family. This is a track called Sweet Songs.
Like the sun to shine on those in our midst and the still unborn in this hour of our great need. You prophesied the return of mandolins and tambourines and tinkling bells and triangles and cymbals, and they sided in on beams from Pharaoh sandals as I slept, taking me unaware, tripping, blowing my mind.
Sarah Fabio, poet with a strong line of black musicians, magicians, don't fight the feeling. On the congas, Big Brother Cyril Leslie Fabio III, Aquarius, solemnly mine.
Solemnly mine, universal man, thinking, feeling, loving, teaching and learning. Rapping with the gods, while soul clamps hands in a communion solely mine.
On drums, Brother Larry Van, Capricorn. On the bass, Brother Ronald Fabio, Sagittarius. With the percussion and special effects, Brother Rick Hopkins, Aquarius. On the lead guitar, Brother Wayne Wallace, Pisces. On the flute, soprano sax, tenor sax, piano, Brother Leon Williams, Gemini. special effects, Thomas Fabio, Aquarius. Sister Sarah Webster Fabio, poet, Capricorn Aquarius.
Yeah, I mean, I still hit those fun bells, those we are one bells. Distant now, they're near, like a sounding drum. And I know soon now the sweet songs are gonna pour like rain from our love-torn souls. One more time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, right on, right on. One more time, right on.
That's Sarah Webster Fabio with a track called Sweet Songs. I don't need to tell you about the band because they all get introduced in the track, don't they? Brilliant album called Alchemy of the Blues came out in 1976 on Folkways Records. This is Jamie Cullum. I hope you're enjoying my show, Jazz Riot, on InterFM. Next up, I've got tracks from the Roy Porter Sound Machine. I've got tracks from Polar Bear, a wonderful band from the UK, a great modern jazz band, Nostalgia 77. Also, music from the Sarah Webster Fabio Poetry Project. Lots of really deep and wonderful jazz music, so keep it tuned.
InterFM, Jamie Cullum's Jazz Riot.
It's another record that totally redefines the way we think about jazz. Here's a track from their latest album, here's Polar Bear and Be Free. Love that track from Polar Bear. It's called Be Free, from their latest album, In Each and Every One. Another important record from them. It's their 5th album. Their last album was called Peepers, came out in 2010. This one came out yesterday on the Leaf label. It's every bit as brilliant as their last few records. Sebastian Rochford, of course, on the drums and production duties. Pete Wareham and Mark Lockhart on the saxophones. Tom Herbert on the double bass. And Leafcutter John on the electronics and guitar. I've got a Maida Vale session from those guys coming up on this show in the coming weeks, so listen out for that. In the meantime, here's one last live track from the Nostalgia 77 session I played you last week. With Yoza Pate on vocals, this is What Do You Know? That was Nostalgia 77 at the Maida Vale Studios, recorded especially for this show. The track was called What Do You Know? That's Tim Giles on drums, Rian Vosloo on bass, James Alsop on reeds, Fulvio Segurta on trumpet, Kit Downs on the piano and organ, Josip Pate on the vocals, and of course the man who leads the whole project, the amazing Benedict Lambden on guitar. If you head to my page of the Radio 2 website, you can see some photographs taken during the recording, bbc.co.uk/Radio 2. And the beautiful new album from Nostalgia 77, A Journey Too Far. It's out right now on True Thoughts Records. Well, I'm nearly at the end of my show right now, but before I leave you, here's a classic track from an artist I had on the show a couple of weeks back. It's from the mid-60s, 1966, Wayne Shorter put out this album, Adam's Apple. Really difficult and interesting time for jazz musicians, just kind of finding their way through. Wayne Shorter kind of coupled it with releasing yet another extraordinary album where he's just completely at the peak of his powers. Here's the title track. This is Wayne Shorter and Adam's Apple. Title track from Wayne Shorter's 1966 Blue Note album. That is Adam's Apple. Bringing me to the end of the show this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. On next week's show, I've got an amazing BBC archive track from Betty Carter. You do not want to miss that. And this has been a Folded Wing production for BBC Radio 2. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. This has been Jamie Cullum's Jazz Riot on InterFM. This is a new version of my show that was originally commissioned by BBC Radio 2. Hope you enjoyed the show. I'll see you next week. Good night.